Hello there and welcome to the Q&A show. We are live, we're interactive. My name is Cyrus Fernando and I'm here every Monday evening here to take your questions. This program is very unique because it's all about our dear viewers. So if you've got any questions about the scriptures, the Bible interpretation, or even creation science tonight, we're delighted to say that we've got Dr Grady McMurtry on the line with us from Florida. Dr Grady there.
I'm delighted to see you.
So nice to see you, Grady. Thank you, as always, for joining us on the Q&A show. There's a lot for us to talk about this evening. And before we go any further, I'm going to start with our first topic for tonight. But in the meantime, I want to just remind our viewers, we are live, we're interactive. All the information will be on the screen throughout the programme. You can email us tonight, live@revelationtv.com. SMS details are also there as well. Maybe you've never written into a live TV programme ever before. Maybe you watch us, but you've never written in. Well, tonight could be your night. We'd love to hear from you. And if it is your first time writing in, then do say so. Grady, what do we always say when people are scared to write in? What advice can we give?
We don't bite. Please go ahead and write in.
Excellent.
We are friendly, we are kind, we are considerate, don't worry.
Oh, bless you, Grady. Love to see you as always. So, Grady, this is the first topic I just want to get your thoughts on tonight, if I can, please. And it's just basically talking about Donald Trump. He's warning the Hamas to release the Israeli hostages before his inauguration. And it says approximately 100 hostages are still being held captive by terrorist group and its supporters of Gaza. After all of the talk about the hostage negotiations over the past year, it appears that a deal may be really happening before President-elect Trump is inaugurated. During his first press conference since being certified by Congress as the next US president, Trump repeated to emphasize what he said it will happen if Hamas doesn't free all the hostages. He said, if they are not back by the time that I get into office, all hell will break loose in the Middle East. And it would not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. As hell will break out, Trump expressed anger about how Hamas has treated hostages, saying the beautiful girl where Hamas threw her into a car, pulled her in her ponytail, and threw her in the car like she was a sack of potatoes. I said, what happened to her? So she's dead. Like a 19, 20-year-old beautiful girl, Trump added, they should have never taken them. There should have never been an attack on October 7th. Also, Grady, tonight, President Biden, outgoing speech, he said Gaza deal is on the brink. And he said we would include a hostage release deal and a surge of aid to Palestinians. So my question to you tonight, Grady, is how come out of all this time since October 7th, we haven't heard anything about the release of hostages? Now Trump has come out to say all hell is going to break loose unless they are released. But now it seems that Biden seems to be trying to take some of the credit. What do you think?
Well, this is exactly what you would expect a liberal president like Biden to do. He wants to take credit for what the conservatives have in fact arranged. And I assure you, Trump is dead serious, excuse that expression, about getting those prisoners back. And we shouldn't be sending Hamas any supplies whatsoever to, in essence, pay a ransom for these hostages. Now, there's humanitarian aid is one thing, but it actually doesn't turn into humanitarian aid. They call it that. But what it does is simply embolden Hamas to continue to fight because they steal the supplies from their people. This is a political party that is absolutely adamant about the destruction of Israel. It says so in their constitution. Why shouldn't you take them at their word?
We've seen the Palestinian people are actually been starving. They've got no food, no supplies, but that's been going on for some time now. And yet we've seen the underground tunnels that have been built by Hezbollah as well and the Hamas terrorists. And they've been hundreds of millions of dollars it's cost to build these very, very elaborate and very futuristic kind of tunnels as well. It's got electricity, it's got supplies, it's got everything you could even want. It's like an apartment, a luxury place, and everything else like that. But yet they're starving their own people. But when we turn the media on, Grady, we see the news is always going from the other side, and it's always showing Israel seem to be killing the innocent, which is clearly untrue. What are your thoughts on that?
No, but Cyrus, I agree with you completely. Again, Biden has been, unfortunately, and I think we should condemn him for his support of Hamas and his lack of support for Israel. He's done everything he can to slow the Israeli advances down. He's done everything he could to embolden Hamas as a political party and as a military entity. But this is no different. Hamas is no different. Of course, it's a religious side to it, but it's no different than the communists would do. They starve their people in order to achieve an objective that's an ideology. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Hamas.
What do you think is going to happen to America now that Trump is going to be in power? Because obviously during his presidency, we didn't really hear or see much about the wars that were taking place. After Biden's outgoing speech, he tried to obviously make himself sound like he had a very successful presidential time in the White House. But we obviously see what's going on in the Middle East. We see what's going on between Russia and Ukraine as well. So what can we hope for when Trump takes charge and control of the White House?
Mr. Trump learned a great deal from his first 4 years as president. And what he found out was that he has a government, not of his own people, but those in what's referred to as the deep state, who were very much liberal, very much against his policies. But when we take a look at what he accomplished in spite of that, the 4 years of President Trump's first term were the single most productive when it comes to the benefit of the Christian community. He helped us in untold ways. And of course, he gave us financial benefits with very low interest rates. He gave us good foreign policies. And I can tell you, personal experience, you will remember I got out of the Ukraine. I'm a full-time missionary. I've been there 59 times to Russia and Ukraine. And I got out 2 days before the war started, before the invasion. First of all, Republicans are always better with foreign policy than Democrats to start with, as a general statement. But the Ukrainian war didn't have to happen. Trump already had an agreement with Putin in place that if he could have stayed in office for his second term then, this would never have happened. Putin, in taking a look at the situation now, yes, he's a tyrant. Yes, he wants to expand and reform the USSR. Yes. But his big problem was the same thing that we had under John Kennedy. When I was alive myself, I was living in D.C. at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the fact of the matter is, it's very analogous. We didn't want Russian missiles in Cuba because it was 90 miles from Miami. He doesn't want NATO missiles in Ukraine because it would be so easy to hit Moscow. And he wants Ukraine as a relatively neutral situation of a buffer. And Trump was quite willing to work with him on that. But it was the Democrats that were not. And as soon as Mr. Trump was out of office, Mr. Biden went in there and started making things far worse.
Interesting as well that we never really hear about Putin talking about any other world leader. But when President Trump was elected as the next president of the US, we heard Putin come out to say it seems that he's very happy and content that President Trump is going to be in the White House, and he really, you can see he respected him by giving him the saying he's a very courageous man. He saw obviously when Trump with that attempted assassination on President Trump, and he stood up immediately, just as someone was trying to take his life, and he stood up with his hands in the air saying, "Fight, fight, fight." And I think that really caught a tone with President Putin, because obviously the Russian culture is trying to show the macho side of a man as well, isn't it?
Yes, and I've said this in some programs previously. Russians love the strong man, and that's why they have followed Putin for all these years. He's a strong man. He's evil in his own way. He would murder anybody to maintain power and control and the ideology. We've got to realize that's who he is. But Russians like the strong man, and I can assure you that when I was in Russia back in say 2016, when Trump was announcing, and before that, of course, 14, 15. Believe it or not, the Russian population, at least the Christian Russian population, was praying that Mr. Trump would get elected.
Interesting, Grady. I want to ask you about the other biggest story that's going on right now is the fire that's taking place in Los Angeles. Obviously, thousands of homes have been affected. Thousands of people have been evacuated. It's not only the Hollywood homes and the rich millionaires who have been suffering, but it's also the people in the poorer areas of Los Angeles as well. They've been left homeless, maybe without any insurance and nowhere even to go and nowhere to live. And with even seeing on tonight's news that they've increased rentals by 50% to try and take advantage of these people as well. And just talking about this subject, Alwyn from South Wales has written in talking about the Los Angeles, says the people of LA are going through the horrible situation. Houses are lost, businesses have gone, they've lost everything. They need our prayers. Do you think that we are close to Jesus returning, or is there more to come? God is in control and we just need to trust. So sad for these people. God bless, from Alwyn in South Wales.
Well, first of all, before anything else, we need to be praying for the people that have been affected and their families, not only from the death, but the loss of phenomenal amount of property value. So let's be compassionate. Secondly, this again is an outward manifestation of the liberal policies that have been going on in California for decades. Now, I am a third generation Californian. For my age, that's very hard to find. And so I was born in San Francisco, 1946. I'm an early baby boomer, as they put it. And I have seen what these liberal policies have done. And this started with no longer wanting to build water reserves in the Sierras, much less in the Santa Monica or San Gabriel Mountains, which are the ones that are right around the north edge of LA. I can tell you that San Francisco, as a metropolitan area, when it was getting larger and larger, ran out of water. So what did they do? They bought a very beautiful valley just down the mountainside from Yosemite National Park, dammed it up to get water for San Francisco because that's the only way they could do it. But the environmental terrorists, this is even before World War II, said, well, it's too beautiful. We don't want to have any more dams, even though it was a totally proper place to put them, but they didn't want any more dams. I myself witnessed one of these valleys that had one of the few covered bridges still left in California, and they inundated the whole thing to get a lake, water, so on. But the environmental terrorists said, we're not going to have it. And they worship nature. They worship their goddess as the goddess Gaia, the mother of the earth. And they simply will not allow dams to be built. They say nature is pristine. They will not spend the money, even though it is obvious it needed to be done. As you heard in the news, if you've been listening to it, they would not go in. They would not do control burns. They would not reduce the fuel supplies or building up on the forest floors. And it's very simple. You can talk about all the modern technology you want, and we've had some news now about, we're going to advance our technology because Silicon Valley, being in California. But the fact of the matter is, you want to put out a fire, you got to have water.
I mean, Donald Trump actually confronted Gavin Newsom, Governor Newsom, a while back, last year, or if not longer, to say there is a serious problem, there's a serious potential fire risk, you haven't got the water in reserve, and he warned him in advance, and clearly nothing had been done.
But Mr. Trump did that years before that as well. It wasn't just last year or the year before. This is actually back more than a decade of time. And just look at what's happened. California and the extreme liberal legislature, the extreme liberal politicians in the major cities like LA, San Francisco, the governor, of course, they want to spend billions of dollars to support illegal aliens, and they will not spend the money to protect American citizens. I mean, that ought to be so obvious to begin with, because the LA mayor, the governor, cut funds to do the things I was just talking about, proper forest management. And they spent the money on all of their liberal programs that are producing nothing but harm.
A viewer here has
I hate
written,
to say
go on.
this, but I wrote an article. Maybe somebody would like to go to my website, creationworldview.org, that there's no one more cruel than a liberal. And I just show that from a biblical standpoint that that is the case. And so I don't want to go too far, accuse anybody too far with that, but liberal policies are cruel. Liberals hate people. They love their power, and that's what they want. And they will walk over anybody. They are basically a religion of death.
Carl's written in from Galway to say, hi, Dr. Grady. Are the fires in California perhaps as a result of America not helping Israel enough as they should have been?
I know there's a lot of emphasis by some Christians who want to say this is God's judgment. Now, first of all, I don't know that that's true. Now, again, we must first be compassionate to the people that have suffered.
Yeah.
Secondly, I don't know whether this is God's judgment or not. It could be. What I do know is these are the natural consequences of the liberal ideology. And so it's not God being mad or angry or punishing people necessarily, although he is in charge of the weather, but he is not in charge of getting people to either burn the fuels or not to prevent these things from happening. People are. And so this is the natural result of their liberal ideology.
Putting the money to one side, Grady, and obviously there were mansions and very wealthy celebrities who have a lot of money in their bank accounts. At the end of the day, it was still their home, whether you've got a mansion or a smaller home. And I think that's what really touched so many people is they've lost their personal possessions. And I guess that puts everyone on to a certain same level playing field. Sadly, a lot of people even didn't realize how serious that fire was going to be. People stayed in their homes and sadly didn't make it out. Was there no warning in advance? Is there nothing in that to tell these people to evacuate, and people actually stayed in their homes, even tried to fight the fire with their little hose pipe from the garden?
I want to point out, it isn't just mansions. It isn't just moderate houses. Even in those areas, which are certainly an area where it's a costly place to live, there were mobile home parks. And the mobile home parks, it's like here with hurricanes, it just wiped them out. So you're talking about people who didn't have much to start with, lost everything, as well as those who lost their whole house and possessions. They didn't lose all their money, but they lost all their house and possessions. And some of them, I don't know about you, I don't care how much money you have. You lose $8 million, it's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
But the same thing is true if you lose 800. If that's all you've got, it's equal suffering. And so we must be compassionate. Please pray for them. Now, please do not give to the American Red Cross. Don't expect FEMA to take care of anything. What you want to do is, if you're going to help at all, and I'm talking as if there's Americans watching the program, and we know there are, you avoid those totally ineffective organizations and you fund things like Samaritan's Purse,
Yeah, absolutely.
other similar Christian organizations. The churches. I don't care where you go in history. When it comes to the United States history, it has been the self-reliance of the people that has made the nation what it is. That when we get hit, we get up and we get going. We don't sit around and wait for useless organizations to come and supposedly help us. And so it's organizations like Samaritan's Purse that are doing the most good out there in California right now.
I know, I love organisations like Samaritan's Purse. They really go on the ground when people are in such despair. They don't only just give relief, but they give prayer and worship, and they really do give companionship as well, and try and give people
share
hope.
the gospel,
Absolutely.
trying to get people saved as well as help them.
I mean, it's the best time when people are in so much despair, there's no hope, and then people can turn to Jesus during that time.
3 years ago, the city where I earned my second doctorate was destroyed. I mean, absolutely flattened by an EF4 tornado. Samaritan's Purse has been there for the last 3 years. They just left.
Wow. Incredible organisation, and we do sincerely appreciate what they do. My final question quickly on this, on the LA fire, Grady, is the houses in America are built differently to the houses in maybe in the UK and Europe. There's a lot of wooden houses. Were there a lot of wooden houses in LA as well that obviously got burnt down a lot easier than a concrete would?
Oh, a lot of those houses, and you have to remember, a lot of those houses were older. Yes, there was new construction in the last 10 years, 20 years, and the houses are built for earthquake survival, but they're not built for fire survival. Now, yeah, sure, there's lots of cinder block, but a lot of that is wood with stucco over it. Were flammable fluids of one kind or another. They have natural gas for stoves and heating and so forth in that area. There's a lot of flammable material, and big deal though is that dry brush, dry shrubs, dry trees that literally can explode with a fire. I don't know whether you've ever seen it or not, but that kind of fire in that kind of area, the fire actually hits one of those trees and they will literally explode. And you talked about how come the people didn't get out. Well, you have to understand that in the Santa Monica Mountains, they're not high mountains like the Sierras, but there's a lot of communities there, and these valleys are very narrow, deep, and very twisty and so forth. And these roads are only 2 lanes wide. They're not highways.
Yeah.
And when people start to try to evacuate on these twisty, turny 2 lane roads and so forth, just one car fails and nobody can get out.
Wow. What about when we heard about the fire, how it was able to jump over houses, jump over mountains, and all of a sudden you see a whole valley is completely burnt out, but yet blocks of little houses haven't even been touched. And they literally said the fire jumped over the house.
Well, they say the fire jumped. That's not exactly what happens. But what happens is that these winds, the Santa Ana winds, are grossly misunderstood by a lot of people. But under the right environmental conditions, the right temperature variance and so forth, these winds come from the north of the mountains, the Simi Valley side of them, for instance. And they funnel through these very tight, narrow canyons, and the speeds can be anything from 30 to 100 miles an hour. And so what will happen is that it's the embers that are being blown by these winds. It looks like the firestorm in Dresden after the bombing in World War II, where the fire creates its own environment. And the flames can literally, by the embers that are hitting, and the wind carries them up and over some area and then back down again. And so that's what they're talking about when they say jumping. But it's just the winds carrying the embers up and over and then back down again.
Thank you, Grady. We're going to go back to our viewer questions now. Want to encourage our viewers. We've got just over half an hour to go. If you want to continue to send in your questions, live at revelationtv.com. SMS details are there as well. Tony's written in to say, good evening, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. I've been looking at a book called The Illustrated Family Bible on my iPad and wonder if it's okay to read and to study alongside the Bible itself, the New American Standard Bible Version, NIV, etc. The book gives you main points and photos of the Bible, and I treat it as a companion and create interest with the added photos. And that's from Tony.
Those kind of Bibles are the kind that were very, very popular in the late 1800s, for instance, and they're still available today. And illustrations are fine if they're accurate, because visual learners will do better with them. But you want to remain in the Bible in terms of the actual text. You don't want to be spread out with some human commentary. But Dewar's graphics were very good. Again, he's in the late 1800s. So the illustrations are the same thing as we go back to the medieval Europe. We go back to 1,000 years ago and so forth. And the people, some places, were not literate, but they carved images. So you go to the cathedrals today, say in France or England, and you'll see the pictorial presentation of the gospel. Well, for those that can't read, that was very good. And if you are a visual learner, it can be very helpful. But be careful about the text.
Thank you so much, Grady. I hope that's answered that viewer's question. This one is from John, and his title of the email is "Where Was Eden?" He says, "Hi, Cy and Dr. Grady. Hope you're well. It's John from Mansfield, UK. Cy, you always look so full of joy every week on the programme. That's very kind. Thank you so much. Grady, I always enjoy all of your knowledge, information, and your insight helped me over the years with creation. My question is, where was the Garden of Eden? Was it somewhere that's now underwater after the flood? God bless, from John."
Well, Eden was underwater for a while during the flood, but the flood literally scraped it off the surface of the earth. But if you had a GPS location, you could go to where it was, but you wouldn't find it because, again, the flood completely erased it off the face of the earth. Now, as to where it was, every text tends to indicate, and I can't say with absolute certainty, but every text indicates that Eden was where Jerusalem is.
Harvey sent us an email, Grady, saying the multi-talented Dr. Grady. And he sent us a photo and he says this. He says, "Dear gentlemen, I attach a screenshot from the New Year's Day concert live from Vienna this year. Surely this can't be Dr. Grady, an accomplished flautist amongst his other talents, or perhaps he has a doppelganger. Happy New Year to you both from Harvey." Grady, is that you or not?
It is definitely not me. And you can tell because
Wow.
the glasses are square and mine are more rounded.
That could be your long lost twin brother that you never knew about. That's amazing. I
Hey,
love
listen,
it.
right camera angle, you know, you and I might look alike. You know?
I doubt it, to be honest with you, Grady. All right, James from Milton Keynes has written in to saying, "Hi, gents. Does entropy affect the temperature of the Earth?" What is entropy, Dr. Grady?
Okay, first of all, the word entropy is used in physics to indicate the loss of the energy of a system. It is involved with the first and second laws of thermodynamics, that all objects lose heat, that the second law affects all systems everywhere. And again, it does affect weather, it does affect how things cool down. Um, but it's just a measurement of the loss of energy in a system over time.
Thank you, Grady. This next one here is from Teresa. Thank you, Teresa, for writing in. Good evening, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. How did God design everything? Where did his idea come from? Had he any previous experience, or is life on earth his first venture? I cannot believe that God would be able to design a human body or different animals or plants. It sounds very unlikely to me. I can believe he set things in motion, planting the seeds of life, but everything that became is not God's exact plan. That's from Teresa. Interesting question there, Teresa. Great. I'd love to know your thoughts.
Well, first of all, God is the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnijudicious God. He is all knowing. That's the omniscience. And so, yes, he knew it all from the beginning. He did create everything whole, complete, perfect to start with because he had the knowledge to do it. He is not a weak God. He is not a God who had to learn how to do things. He's not a God who turned a screwdriver here and a wrench there over time. Because if that was true, he'd be a weak God, and he would not be the kind of God that we would want. And if he were a weak God, he could not save us. I'm going to make a suggestion rather than give you a whole long answer. But again, if you'll go to my website at creationworldview.org, we actually have an article that's in the technical section. And the reason for that is because it's a fairly high level piece of work. Talking about does God not know anything? You know, is there anything he doesn't know? And the argument that people have is called open theology, that there are things that he has to learn as he goes along. And this article very effectively and very thoroughly proves that that's not true. God is the omniscient God who knows all things. And this is why he can also know the beginning and the end. He brought everything into existence. He has the knowledge to do even the most minute genetics that we have or spaceships. It doesn't matter. And this is why he could create whole, complete, and perfect 6,000 years ago. And to doubt it is simply to say that you cannot believe in a God who is all powerful. But you can. And the Bible does support that, and physics. All of science supports it, whether it's the laws of genetics, laws of, for instance, entropy, thermodynamics. Everything proves that, in fact, he does know it all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grady. Yvonne's written in to say, does God love all people? That's her question. And she says, if that's the case, why does God hate the Palestinians? I don't think he does, to be honest. Why does the life of a Jewish person is more important than that of a Palestinian? I'm losing my faith when I listen to so-called Christian people only able to show compassion towards the Jewish people. I believe that they are Christian people living in Gaza. What should we do about them? That's from Yvonne.
Yvonne, first of all, God does love every human being equally. Jesus died for everyone equally. However, his salvation only comes to those who accept the gift of salvation. And he does love the Palestinians just as much as the Jews, just as much as the Christians, just as much as all the others. But while God is all loving, he is also, and I said this a moment ago, he is also omnijudicious. He is all judging, and he has a standard by which we are to be judged. And the reason for the condemnation of the Palestinians is not because God does not love them. He does. He died for them. But the problem is they will not accept him, and they are doing very evil things, which is against his standard. And so what we need to do, we need to pray for them. We need to try to get them the gospel. We need to try to get them saved, because they are following a religion that is a religion of, well, the terrorists, as you know, though many of them are actually quite peaceful if you had them side by side on an individual basis. But this is a religious thing. We need to get them saved. We need to get them the gospel, and that would cure the problem. So I just want you to know, yes, he does love them 100%, just as much as you. But he's got a standard, and they do not meet it.
Thank you so much for that answer, Dr. Grady. Mandy's written in asking about cremation or burial. Good evening, gentlemen. Does the Bible favour burial over cremation for Christians? Or, since God will be resurrecting us with new bodies, does it not matter which is chosen? Thank you and blessings from Mandy.
Well, Manny, I mean, it's a good question, but there's a good answer as well. First of all, in death, we must honor the body, must be treated properly before it is buried or cremated. However, in terms of the methodology, while we see burial as being the most common, certainly in the records, there's nothing wrong with cremation either. Because if you think about it, after burial, the same thing happens. It's just a slower process. But it doesn't matter whether the process of decay of the physical being is fast or slow. At the resurrection, God can put it back together again. After all, he made it. And so it's much more important as to where the spirit and the soul go after the death. But we must honor the body, treat it properly, honor it as the temple of the person that we knew. But my own mother was cremated, so was my father. There's nothing wrong with that. It is simply the fast process of what's going to happen anyway.
This one's from Kevin, is written in to say, hi, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. Should the Ukraine pay back every bit of money it's received from the US the same way Britain paid back its war and post-war loans? Thank you and blessings from Kevin.
Well, I kind of wish so, particularly since I'm an American taxpayer. And we have given Ukraine far more money than, quote, we should have, because we're doing things like we're funding their retirement programs. I'm sorry, but as an American citizen, I don't think we should be funding their retirement programs. Giving them weapons to defend themselves against an aggressor is one thing. Giving them money to run their own government and to run their own social security system, as we would call it, I disagree with.
Explain a little bit more about that, Grady, funding their retirement programs. Tell us more.
Ukraine doesn't have money. It's really quite simple. They've taken some very serious hits in the war, but they are in the West. Now we have to separate Ukraine into two parts. The eastern third, which has Russian ethnic backgrounds, is the industrial part of the country. It's the east side of the Dnieper River. The west side, the other two-thirds, is ethnically Ukrainian. You have a faction of differences here. However, because it's the Russian portion, the industrial portion in the east, and of course on the north edge of Ukraine as well from the Russian side, they have the backing of Russia. They now have the backing of North Korea, China, etc. But the Ukrainians, in fighting this war, they don't have enough tax money to buy the munitions and so forth, but they're quite willing to fight. As a national Ukrainian, they don't want a Russian invasion. And so while they're quite willing to fight, they're quite ingenious. As a matter of fact, they've done some really neat stuff for those of us that are military of background. They pulled off some amazing military feats. But they don't have the money to buy these weapons on a continuing basis or to develop new weapons. They have to get them from the outside. Well, what we have done is basically we've given them money, but it's not so much money as materials. But because they don't have the money to even support their welfare system, the United States has been sending them money to support the welfare system. And people who are getting their pension checks, so to speak, from the government in the Ukraine, it's because of American taxpayer dollars.
How do you see this war ending, Grady?
I see it ending very quickly if Mr. Trump can get in there and get a handle on it. Because, again, Mr. Trump, Mr. Putin basically knew exactly what each other wanted. They respected each other, and they would have both gotten what they wanted. Peace in the Ukraine and no NATO missiles in Ukraine. I mean, that's the two basic chips that were being talked about. Mm-hmm. And this war did not have to happen. In October before the invasion, Mr. Trump was in a position, everybody was ready to kind of rock and roll with it, but they were waiting until he was then elected for his second term to put it in effect. Because if he wasn't reelected, then the next person, which of course would have been and is Biden, would never have gone along with it. And so you had to wait till he was reelected. Well, he wasn't reelected, and it fell through.
Thank you, Grady. This one is from Peter to say, asking about creation. Hi, brethren. Your opinion on the resurrection of geocentric view would be appreciated. Some serious scientists, including Einstein, agree that mathematically the equations work with the Earth or the Sun at the center. It seems to make more sense theologically. Earth was created first. And he says, number 2, the light on days 1 to 3 clearly was not electromagnetic, EM, as the light was created by matter. And number 3, the redshift, are there other explanations beside the Doppler effect? Thank you, from Peter.
Well, Peter, I would disagree with you. Your first point, not so much, but your second is totally in error. And the third, yes, there are many answers to that as well. So first of all, yes, the Earth was created first, and the sun, moon, and stars were created on day 4. However, that was the perfect order of creation. And the light on the first 3 days was electromagnetic because it was simply created that way by God. God is the light giver. He's the one who creates light. Jesus is the light of the world, etc. And light emanates from God's throne. Now, God spoke light into existence. Verse 3, day 1. And when he spoke it into existence, because he is God, he doesn't need the sun to create it. He can simply speak it into existence. And so while it was electromagnetic, it was still created by God. Then he placed the sun there and replaced the light that he simply spoke into existence with the natural light from the sun. Secondly, the second part of your question, and I'm sorry, when I start answering questions, sometimes I don't remember the third or the second.
Shall I read you the second one, Grady?
Yeah, go ahead.
It says the light on day 1 to 3 clearly was not electromagnetic, EM, as the light is created by matter.
Well, and as I said, no, I did kind of get the answer, but light does not have to be created by matter because God can speak it into existence. And once the photons are traveling, they are traveling in an electromagnetic way. The third part was, can you get redshift without expansion, which is the Doppler effect, the redshift? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. The universe does not need to be expanding at all to get redshift. Now, while we do see redshift and we also see blue shift, we do see some objects in the universe that are actually moving towards us, which is the blue shift. Most objects we see have a redshift, but that doesn't mean they're moving, and it doesn't mean that it's expanding. Because there are different ways, I don't want to take too long with the program, but you have what's called lazy light. That once light is created by, say, a star, and it's traveling at a certain frequency, over time, energy is being used up for the light to travel. We now know that's true. And so what's going to happen? The frequency is going to slow down. So it's going to go from red towards the blue simply because of the loss of energy. Or when light hits a particle, a dust particle, a gas particle in space, and light does hit them, according to the laws of thermodynamics, the particle will warm up by the absorption of energy. And because it's warmed up, when the light is then re-emitted, it's re-emitted at a redder wavelength. And so there are those two, a stretching of the wave by gravitation. We do know that gravity does bend light, and when it bends, then the frequency is, well, it has to cover the same distance, the same amount of time. It stretches the light wave, and so that looks redder. So I just give you three of some of the ways in which you can get redshift without expansion.
Thank you, Grady. This next one here is from Michael to say, hi, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. We are told to bless Israel and the peace of Israel and Jerusalem. Do we bless the government, IDF, and all individual Israeli people? That's from Michael.
Well, we are told that we are to bless the nation and the individuals, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily because that individual, say, or that individual government is good, but we are to pray for them. And especially the admonition that those who love Israel, God will love, and those who curse Israel, God will curse. And so even if you simply want to be selfish, you would still want to pray for them.
Very good, Grady. Thank you. Peter is written in to say, hi, brothers. Are you familiar with the University of Basel and the Rockefeller University doing a survey some years ago involving 5 million people and animal DNA, concluding that humans and animals came from two? That's blessings from Peter.
Did he say comes from two?
It says humans and animals came from two.
Meaning original pairs of each kind?
I think so.
I think that's what he means, which of course is consistent with what the Bible says. I would also point out, however, that the Rockefeller Foundation and Basel and so forth is a very liberal place. But regardless of which, we can tell from genetic studies that life, both plant, animal, people, has only been around for 6,000 years due to what's called genetic entropy. We talked about entropy earlier, the loss of energy, but it's also the loss of information over time. And our genome is going down, it's decaying just like all the others. But by tracing it backwards, we can come to the conclusion that, again, God created kinds, that one kind did not evolve from another. Now, we have kinds that then turn into varieties for very good reasons, but they're still the same kind. So a house cat, if you incrementally breed upwards in size, will breed all the way up to a lion, a tiger, and back down again, but it has to be done in small increments. But there's a cat kind, and it doesn't matter whether it's a house cat or a lion, it's still a cat.
This one's from Marilyn Grady to say, hi, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. Watching the news, so many of the houses destroyed were left only there by brick chimneys which were left. There were houses made of flimsy wood. There was a clever man on Malibu Beach who built a strong home that survived. Did some people build cheaper homes just because of the prestigious address? That's Marilyn in Wales.
Well, they built at different times too. Remember that there were homes there from the 1920s,
Mm,
1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It's a prestigious area as you think about it because you hear about the expensive neighborhoods being burned, and they were. But again, I pointed out earlier in the program, there were also mobile home parks in those hills.
yeah.
And so, yes, there's areas where the picturesque parts are the most valuable and so forth. But many of those homes date back quite a ways in the building codes. And of course, there were those people who built with a lot of cement, but there were also people that, again, built with wood, put stucco over it for different styles of construction. Now, in England, you had a lot of stone construction because you had stone.
Mm.
And you didn't necessarily have forests like we do. I mean, we have tremendous forests. And so the building of a home may be because of its appearance and not simply because of the money.
Mm, interesting. Do you think the regulations may now change of when they're trying to rebuild Los Angeles and the way that certain homes are being built now, that they can be protected from such fires that could happen in the future?
Oh, there's no question about it. First of all, though, remember that the insurance companies pulled out, many of them, 4, 5, 6 months ago,
Yeah.
and there was no insurance to rebuild. People are going to be selling these lots because they cannot afford to rebuild. They've lost it.
Wow.
And so people are going to come in and take advantage of that land, buying it 50 cents on the dollar or 10 cents on the dollar, whatever. But then in terms of the building codes, number one, of course, there'll be far more fire retardant materials. In addition to which, though, and I'd like to give an explanation from Florida because we've also just had two natural disasters in the last 6 months. We have two very serious hurricanes. I lived through both of them and then suffered through one of them a second time.
Wow.
But over on the Gulf Coast, both of them hit not too far apart. Helene was a little kinder, but Milton was devastating. And because of that, many of those homes on the Gulf Coast of Florida will never be rebuilt. And the reason for that is, again, they're going to require new standards where if you're going to build a house in the area where you're going to get tidal surge in a hurricane, as we did experience, and you always do with hurricanes, you're going to have to be able to afford to build steel pilings 14 to 20 foot down to anchor that house and lift it up off the ground, build it on stilts so the water will go under it. And the cost of that is going to be prohibitive.
Mm.
And there are going to be insurance companies who simply say, we won't insure it. If you build it, you're on your own. And that's
Wow.
here in Florida. Well, that's an example of what's going to happen in California, a very similar thing, that they are not going to allow you to get insurance, or they're going to make the building code so massively constrictive that you can't rebuild it if you wanted to.
Didn't the state of California come out last week or over the weekend, Grady, with the mayor and the senator saying that they have the insurance available, and although the insurance company weren't going to insure some of those people who lost their homes, the state was still going to help those people financially? Is that taking place? Or, as you said initially, are people just going to have to just sell the land itself and just take the huge loss of losing their home?
Many of them will just have to sell the land just to get out of it and get
Wow.
something back. And they're going to move and go someplace else. Now, remember that we destroyed over 12,000 structures. This includes homes, libraries, the firehouses, the power generation lines, transmission lines. Getting electric power back into some of these areas is going to take a very long time because all the transmission equipment was destroyed. I mean, the water, again, getting water back in there, well, that requires electricity to pump it, right?
Exactly.
And so if you can't get electricity in there for a long period of time, you're not going to get water back
But
in there for a long
isn't
period
that
of
one of
time.
the main issues as well? With they were saying there was no water in the hydrants, and that's because of the safety of the fire, they had to turn off the electricity, and that electricity related to the pumps coming out through the hydrants as well.
That's a yes and no. That's part of it. But the reservoirs that are built up at the top of the Santa Monica Mountains, gravity feeding water down for this purpose of the hydrants. The single biggest one had been shut down for repairs and not refilled. And that one reservoir contained more water than the three smaller reservoirs that were there, and they drained those in a matter of hours.
Wow.
So, again, this is very bad planning. This is what you get with these liberal policies and environmental issues that they have. And so they were very ill prepared, very ill managed. Even though the warnings were there, they didn't take care of the fuel. They didn't take care of the water. Another reason for turning off the electricity is because many of the fires in Southern California are caused because of the poor maintenance of the PG&E electrical system. And they have had sparks from their own equipment that started forest fires.
Wow.
So in high winds, for instance, and storms, they'll turn off the electricity because when the wires do break and come down, they'll start fires, and they try not to do that.
For sure. Completely understandable. Well, my dear mother, Barbara, has written into the programme, Grady. She seems to be watching tonight. She says this.
Hugs and kisses, Barbara.
She says, hi, Dr. Grady and Cy. I'm still shocked to see the fires is still going on. That's in Los Angeles. I remember there's always been regular fires in California for so many years. How come most of the residents has not built a basement with an iron safe on the to store important documents and precious items there? I saw in the Fox News the famous actor Mel Gibson, whose house was totally destroyed, and yet the statue of Mother Mary was untouched. But this couple's home was destroyed. What an amazing miracle. That certainly gave most of those families hope, and miracles are happening in the midst of destruction. Praise God for the saving statue. Have a blessed new year, Dr. Grady. Love and blessings from Barbara. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
How sweet is that?
You have a lovely mother, yes.
Indeed. Concur with that, Grady. This next one here, it says, good evening, Grady. If your home were threatened by floods or fire, what 3 things would you take with you? Ooh.
Well, number 1 would be my wife.
I was going to say my wife and my daughter. I was going to say number 1 with the mobile phone, but I said, I guess I've got to take the wife and the daughter first, right?
Well, presumably the phone was on me, so I wouldn't be concerned about that. But, in situations like that, people think they know what they're going to try to take, or they preloaded it or whatever, but you can only take 1 carload. I mean, a lot of things happen. Yeah. A lot of things happen.
Very good. So what are the 3 items you're taking?
Oh, I don't know, because first of all, where I live isn't going to flood, and highly unlikely that it's going to burn. So
very good. So you're all good. So we're all good.
But see, I planned ahead. When I bought this piece of property, which is not a very large piece of property, we don't have a big home. But when I bought it, I took a look at the map of the 500-year floodplain. And the piece of property I bought was above the 500-year floodplain, which means pretty much it's going to have to be another worldwide flood.
Wow. Well, we just got a couple of minutes before the end of the programme. Grady Satinder's written in to say, greetings to you both. He's asking about one world government. If alien disclosure does happen in the US, does Dr. Grady believe that it will ultimately be used to bring about a one world government as prophesied in the Bible? That's from Satinder.
Yeah, I know Satinder, but I didn't quite follow that. Did he say alien government?
He said, if alien disclosure does happen in the US, does Dr. Grady believe that it will ultimately be used to bring about a one world government as prophesied in the Bible?
I'm going to have to ask you, Cyrus, to help me decipher the question. Is he talking about aliens as in not from this world?
I don't know, to be honest with you, because he says if alien disclosure does happen in the US, yeah. So he seems to be convinced it's going to happen, but I don't think that's the right wording, to be honest.
Well, since I'm sorry, we're having a little problem with your question, but basically, first of all, there's no such thing as aliens from some other planet. I mean, that if you start there, then that can't be the situation. So there's no such thing as aliens. There is such a thing as demonic activity, which mimics aliens. but there's no such thing as aliens themselves.
Why don't
Again,
we? Why don't we all?
15, for instance.
Why don't we answer the question about the one world government? What are your thoughts on that, Grady?
Well, of course, Satan's general plan is to try to get a one world government under himself. But in terms of being disclosed in the United States, well, would it be disclosed here but not someplace in Europe? I mean, I don't get it. My point being is there's no such thing as aliens from some other planet, so that can't be, and it could be. But Satan's plans using demonic activity to deceive people who are willingly and wantingly to be deceived certainly could help achieve his goal of trying to get a one world government. So I don't know that I can take it further than that. Okay,
Grady, let's see if we can get this one in before we finish the show. Peter's written in to say, Shalom, brethren. He's saying, many thanks for taking my earlier question. I agree. The Lord certainly could have created them light without matter. It seems the light in days 1 and 2 and the New Jerusalem is a different quality. He says, a new question. Would you agree the human skin, wonderful tissue, seems to make little evolutionary sense if it was to have evolved from, e.g., primates, lack of hair for insulation and protection, etc. More plausible, our skin was not intended as our final covering. Glory was our original covering, which was lost at the fall. Many blessings from Peter. What are your thoughts?
Well, Peter, that's a good insight. I would say it a little differently. If you'll notice that once Adam and Eve sinned, they try to cover themselves with a vegetative offering, which was not appropriate. And when God confronts them, he says, wait a minute, I told you to listen to me, but you've been listening to somebody else. And that vegetative covering isn't going to do it. And this is when he teaches them about blood sacrifice and blood covering. But it's interesting because they say, well, we suddenly realized that we were naked. Now, to become naked, you've got to take something off, as best I understand the term, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've come to kind of understand that he said glory. I would say light. That in a perfect creation, because God is the light giver, Jesus is the light of the world, etc., that in a perfect creation, all objects were bathed or clothed in light.
Grady, 10 seconds if you can, 10 seconds.
But when they sinned, they lost the light clothing. And that's what they were referring to.
Okay.
So I would say light, not glory.
Good timing. Thank you so much. I want to say a huge thank you. Dr. Grady McMurtry, thank you so much for joining us on Revelation TV. And I want to encourage our viewers, check out Grady's website, creationworldview.org. Thank you, Grady, and God bless you. And thank you so much to all our dear viewers as well for writing in through this programme. And we look forward to seeing you the same time next week on Revelation TV, the Q&A show. Take care. God bless. See you soon. Bye-bye.